The conference room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and expensive perfume when Evelyn slid the handover form across the glass table without trembling once. Nobody noticed the thin gray folder she left beside legal counsel's laptop until 4 regions went dark before sunrise, and the company discovered ambition was a poor substitute for someone who actually understood the system. By 8:10 a.m., the 23rd floor looked less like a technology company and more like the waiting room of a delayed airport during a thunderstorm. Slack notifications burst across monitors like popcorn in hot oil. Someone in infrastructure was pacing near the espresso machine with 2 phones pressed against his chest as if he could physically stop the panic from escaping into the hallway. Outside the panoramic windows, rain dragged itself down the glass in silver veins. The city beneath it pulsed through fog and brake lights, restless and indifferent. Inside, however, every conversation had the same nervous rhythm. Has anyone reached Evelyn? Check the rollback logs. No, not staging, the production gateway. Why are Frankfurt and Sao Paulo both down? The questions kept colliding into one another like shopping carts with broken wheels. At the far end of the operations floor, Nathan Cole stood rigid beside the incident response monitor, jaw clenched so tightly the muscle twitched near his temple. 12 hours earlier, he had congratulated himself for surviving another strategic workforce optimization initiative. The phrase still echoed in his mind with the sterile cruelty of corporate vocabulary: strategic, optimization, as if removing people from their livelihoods was the same as trimming excess code from an application. Now the dashboards glowed red. API failure. The words flashed again and again across 4 regions. And somewhere beneath the noise of alarms and conference calls, a colder thought began tapping quietly against Nathan's ribs. Evelyn had warned them. Nobody wanted to say it aloud yet. The overnight outage had started small, almost politely, a latency spike, then token validation errors, then cascading authentication failures spreading across regional clusters like cracks racing through ice. By dawn, enterprise clients couldn't process transactions, healthcare integrations stalled, logistics platforms froze mid-sync. The company website still displayed its cheerful blue slogan about seamless connectivity. The irony tasted metallic. Nathan rubbed his eyes and turned toward the executive conference room where the emergency meeting had already begun. Through the frosted glass wall, silhouettes moved sharply under cold white lights. Fast gestures, tight shoulders, the body language of people trying to blame gravity for a building collapse. Inside, HR Director Vanessa Vale sat perfectly composed at the polished table, one manicured hand wrapped around a ceramic cup. Her expression remained almost offensively calm, though the edges of her lipstick had faded slightly. "We need immediate containment messaging," she said. "Clients cannot think we're unstable." A silence followed. Then someone from cybersecurity let out a dry laugh before catching himself. Unstable, as if the servers had experienced an emotional episode. Nathan stepped inside carrying a tablet full of outage metrics. The room smelled of stress and recycled air. Half-empty water bottles crowded the table beside untouched pastries nobody would eat. "We've isolated the authentication cascade," he said carefully, "but the gateway orchestration patch wasn't finalized?" Vanessa looked up. "Why not?" He hesitated for one dangerous second, because the engineer responsible was escorted out yesterday carrying a cardboard box and a dying office orchid. Instead, he chose diplomacy. The transition documentation may be incomplete. The legal counsel, Martin Greer, slowly removed his glasses. His face had gone pale in the particular way expensive paper does under fluorescent light. "There's something else," he murmured. Every eye shifted toward him. Martin opened a gray folder resting beside his laptop. Thin, ordinary, the kind of folder executives ignored because it wasn't attached to a PowerPoint presentation. Inside sat a printed email chain. Subject line, RE, Section 4.2, Security Liability Escalation. The room changed temperature instantly. Nathan recognized Evelyn's writing before Martin even spoke the first sentence aloud. Her emails always carried surgical precision. No theatrics, no emotional leakage, just clean observations sharp enough to cut glass. If API Gateway Token Refresh Dependency remains unpatched during regional scaling migration, Martin read quietly, authentication failure risk may propagate across linked environments. Documentation attached previously on March 11th, April 3rd, and June 27th. Someone swallowed audibly. Vanessa's posture stiffened. Martin continued, per Section 4.2 Security Liability Obligations, acknowledgement of unresolved exposure transfers executive operational responsibility after employee separation. The silence afterward felt enormous. Rain hammered harder against the windows. Nathan suddenly remembered yesterday afternoon with uncomfortable clarity, the layoff room, the gray carpeting, the bowl of untouched mints placed in the center of the table like an apology nobody believed. Vanessa had smiled with polished sympathy while explaining the restructuring. We're moving toward a more ambitious culture. Evelyn had simply nodded once. No tears, no pleading, no anger. That calm, unsettled people more than rage ever could. Nathan remembered watching her sign the handover form with elegant, steady handwriting while security stood awkwardly near the door, pretending not to listen. Then she had slid the gray folder toward Martin. For counsel? She'd said softly. Nothing else. No speech. No warning. Just that faint expression in her eyes, as if she had already stepped emotionally outside the building, while everyone else remained trapped inside it. Back in the present, the conference room buzzed with rising panic. Was this documented properly? Someone asked. Martin looked exhausted already. Repeatedly. Vanessa crossed her arms. Then why wasn't remediation prioritized? Nobody answered immediately, because remediation wasn't visible enough for quarterly reports, because prevention rarely photographs well in shareholder decks, because ambitious people loved launches more than maintenance. The truth sat heavily between them like smoke. Nathan stared again at Evelyn's email timestamps. Months of warnings, follow-ups, attached diagrams, risk projections, escalation notices, and beneath every message, the same professional closing, "Regards, Evelyn Mercer." No bitterness. That somehow made it worse. Across the operations floor, another alert detonated on the monitoring screens. Secondary authentication nodes were failing under rerouted traffic load. A junior engineer cursed under his breath before catching himself. Someone else whispered, "This is spreading." The room erupted into overlapping conversations. "We need external support." "Can we restore previous architecture?" "Who has the encryption rotation map?" Nathan already knew the answer to that last question. Evelyn, or rather, Evelyn had, because the updated map existed somewhere in the handover archive no one had bothered reviewing after escorting her out. Corporate arrogance often arrived wearing confidence and left disguised as surprise. Nathan walked back into the hallway, pulse hammering behind his eyes. Through the glass walls, employees moved faster now, their polished professionalism cracking under pressure. He noticed details he normally ignored: trembling hands around coffee cups, mascara beginning to smudge beneath fluorescent lights, ties loosened half an inch too early in the morning. Fear made offices strangely human. Then his phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. 3 words. "Check Appendix C." Nothing else. Nathan stopped walking. Cold slid down his spine despite the overheated office air, because Appendix C had been removed from the official migration packet 2 weeks ago during executive revisions, and almost nobody knew that. He looked slowly toward the rain-streaked windows, toward the waking city beyond them, while somewhere deep in the building another alarm began to ring. The worst part was no longer the outage. It was the growing realization that Evelyn might still be 3 steps ahead of everyone in the company she no longer worked for. And if Appendix C contained what Nathan suspected, the disaster unfolding this morning was only the visible part of something much larger. You'll want to see what was hidden in Appendix C before the executives did. Nathan found Appendix C at 8:47 a.m., buried inside a deprecated compliance archive that nobody had opened in almost 6 months. The document itself looked harmless. 6 pages, neutral formatting, gray headers, the visual personality of tax paperwork, yet the moment he opened the first attachment, his stomach tightened. Outside the operations floor windows, the storm clouds had thickened into a bruised charcoal sky. Lightning flickered somewhere behind the skyline, silent from this distance, like a camera flash at the scene of an accident. The office lighting suddenly felt too bright, exposing every anxious expression with cruel precision. Around him, keyboards clattered with frantic urgency. The company had entered that dangerous corporate phase where people stopped solving problems and started protecting themselves from blame. Nathan scrolled further. Evelyn's notes were painfully methodical. Dependency inheritance risks, regional token synchronization vulnerabilities, escalation delays caused by executive approval bottlenecks. Each line read less like speculation and more like someone quietly describing a fire, while others argued about the color of the smoke. Then he reached the highlighted section. If regional API fallback routing is activated without synchronized credential propagation, automated security containment may interpret mirrored requests as hostile duplication behavior. Nathan stared. He read it again slower. Hostile duplication behavior, the current containment protocol, the one actively spreading across 4 regions. A cold silence opened inside his chest. Oh no, he he whispered. Nearby, two engineers were arguing near the monitoring dashboard. We should isolate Asia Pacific completely and lose every client session? We're already losing them. A manager rushed past carrying 3 laptops stacked against his arm like unstable dinner plates. Someone else knocked over a coffee near the incident station, dark liquid spreading across printed infrastructure diagrams. Nobody even reacted. The office smelled like overheating electronics and exhaustion. Nathan grabbed his tablet and headed toward conference room Atlas, where executives had converted panic into a meeting schedule. Through the glass walls, Vanessa was already speaking sharply into a headset, while legal counsel rubbed both temples with visible regret. Nathan entered without knocking. "We have a bigger issue," he said. Nobody looked happy to see him. Vanessa muted her headset. "Please tell me it's solvable." "That depends how quickly we stop the automated containment loop." A pause. Martin frowned. "In English." Nathan pulled the appendix onto the main display. Lines of infrastructure diagrams bloomed across the screen like subway maps designed by insomniacs. "The gateway isn't just failing," he explained. "It thinks it's under attack." Silence. Then Cybersecurity Director Elias Warren leaned forward slowly. "That's impossible." Nathan wished it were. The fallback routing copied unsynchronized credentials across regions. The containment protocol interpreted the duplication as malicious replication behavior and started quarantining healthy nodes. The room went still enough to hear rain striking the windows. Every automated defense system was now attacking the company's own infrastructure, like a hospital immune system rejecting a transplanted organ. Vanessa stood abruptly. "Can we shut containment down?" "No," Elias answered before Nathan could. "Not globally." "Why not?" "Because if there's an actual intrusion buried inside the mirrored traffic, disabling containment exposes every client credential pipeline simultaneously." Another silence, this one heavier. Somewhere outside the room, another notification alarm rang through the floor. Nathan watched understanding slowly drain color from Vanessa's face. This wasn't a temporary outage anymore. This was legal exposure. Financial exposure, reputational exposure, the kind shareholders discussed in low voices while pretending not to panic. Martin adjusted his glasses carefully. "Was this specifically outlined?" Nathan looked at him, then nodded once. "In writing." Nobody spoke for several seconds. The projector hummed softly above them. Rainwater crawled down the windows in crooked rivers. The city beyond looked blurred and distant now, as if the entire building had slipped underwater. Vanessa finally folded her arms. "She should have explained this more clearly." Nathan almost laughed, not because it was funny, because the statement itself was so spectacularly unfair, it became surreal. "She documented it 4 separate times," he replied carefully. Vanessa's jaw tightened. The irony hanging over the room was impossible to ignore. The employee considered insufficiently ambitious had been the only person planning for catastrophe, and now catastrophe had arrived exactly on schedule. Nathan returned to the operations floor where the atmosphere had deteriorated further. Slack channels moved too fast to read. Client escalation tickets multiplied every minute. A junior analyst sat frozen in front of a monitor with the expression of someone watching a slow-motion avalanche. Then came the first media inquiry. The notification appeared quietly. Reuters requesting statement regarding multinational service interruption. The room collectively inhaled. External awareness changed everything. Internal disasters still allowed denial. Public disasters developed gravity. A communications manager hurried toward Vanessa's office carrying a draft statement already swollen with phrases like temporary degradation and intermittent instability. Corporate language always tried dressing disasters in softer fabric. Meanwhile, reality continued breaking downstairs. Nathan checked the latest metrics. 3 additional enterprise clients had disconnected. Authentication queues were backing up beyond safe thresholds. And buried inside the logs, he noticed something strange. One region remained stable. Toronto. Completely stable. No containment cascade, no token corruption, no routing panic. Nathan narrowed his eyes. That made no sense. He opened the configuration comparison, then froze. Toronto was still running Evelyn's unrevised gateway policy, untouched by the executive optimization initiative. For one strange second, the surrounding noise faded completely. He remembered another moment from months earlier. Evelyn standing near the break room windows late at night, city lights reflecting softly against her coffee cup, while deployment dashboards glowed behind her. "People think resilience is dramatic," she'd said quietly back then. But most resilience is just boring preparation nobody appreciates until the ceiling caves in. Nathan hadn't fully understood the sentence at the time. Now it landed like a verdict. Behind him, voices rose again. Containment spread to backup authentication. Client escalation from Frankfurt. Legal wants updated exposure estimates. Who approved this rollout? That last question lingered in the air longer than the others, because everyone already knew the answer. Approval signatures existed, timelines existed, emails existed, and somewhere beyond this storm of collapsing systems and executive panic sat a woman no longer employed by the company, probably drinking coffee in peace while the architecture she tried to protect imploded exactly as predicted. Not revenge, just consequences arriving with terrifying punctuality. Nathan's phone vibrated again. Unknown number. This time, only a single sentence appeared. Toronto still has the old keys. He stared at the message. No signature, no explanation, but he knew. A strange feeling crept into the center of the chaos then, not hope exactly, but direction. Like spotting a lighthouse through hurricane fog. If Toronto truly held the untouched gateway policy, they might still have a narrow path to stop the collapse before regulators and clients turn this into a public execution. But another realization followed immediately after. To access those systems safely, they would need Evelyn's authorization architecture, and nobody in the building had bothered asking where that access actually lived before escorting her out with a cardboard box. The next decision inside that glass tower would determine whether this became an outage or a scandal powerful enough to destroy careers. You're about to find out who was willing to beg the woman they dismissed yesterday. One overlooked warning turned into a multinational crisis overnight. Follow the story and drop your theory in the comments before the next chapter changes everything. At 11:32 a.m., the board joined the crisis call. The atmosphere inside Conference Room Atlas shifted instantly from panic to ceremony. People straightened in their chairs, jackets were adjusted, voices lowered half a tone into artificial professionalism, as if expensive vocabulary could reduce the temperature of a burning building. Outside the glass walls, the operations floor still looked like controlled chaos wrapped in fluorescent light. Engineers moved between desks carrying chargers, tablets, half-finished reports. Someone was crying quietly near the printer station while pretending to search for documents. Nobody acknowledged it. The city beyond the windows had disappeared entirely behind rain. Nathan sat near the far end of the conference table with Toronto's Gateway Diagnostics open on his laptop. The only stable region in the company glowed green on his screen like a stubborn candle refusing to die in a collapsing cathedral. Meanwhile, the board members appeared one by one across the wall monitor. New York, London, Singapore, small digital rectangles containing expensive concern. Chairman Victor Hale spoke first, his silver hair immaculate even through compressed video quality. "We need clarity," he said calmly. "How severe is the exposure?" Nobody answered immediately, because the truthful version sounded catastrophic. Vanessa finally leaned forward. "The outage remains operationally contained." Nathan nearly looked up from his laptop in disbelief. Contained? 3 continents were throttling authentication traffic like collapsing lungs. Martin Greer subtly closed his eyes for half a second, the universal expression of a lawyer watching wording become future evidence. Elias cleared his throat. The API failure has spread across 4 primary regions, with cascading containment responses impacting enterprise services. Victor's face hardened. And root cause? Another silence, this one more dangerous than the previous ones. Vanessa answered carefully. A transition issue related to infrastructure oversight during personnel restructuring. Nathan stared at the table. Personnel restructuring. There it was again. That corporate instinct to hide human decisions behind phrases polished smooth enough to avoid guilt. Nobody said Evelyn's name, but her absence filled the room anyway. Victor folded his hands together. "Can it be reversed?" Nathan spoke before anyone else could shape the answer into something decorative. "Yes," he said. Several heads turned. "But only through the original authorization architecture?" Martin immediately understood. "We need her." Nathan nodded once. The room reacted subtly but visibly. Tiny shifts, tightened jaws, eyes avoiding one another. Because asking for Evelyn meant admitting she had been right. And for certain executives, that possibility felt more threatening than the outage itself. Vanessa exhaled slowly. "Surely another engineer can reconstruct the authorization chain?" Nathan rotated his laptop toward the center display. "This is the reconstruction attempt." The screen filled with failed credential maps and broken dependency trees, red everywhere. "It would take days." Victor's expression sharpened. "How long do we actually have?" Elias answered quietly. "Hours." Thunder rolled faintly outside the building. No one spoke after that. The silence became its own kind of confession. Nathan remembered yesterday evening again with painful clarity now. Evelyn standing beside the elevator after signing the handover form, one hand resting lightly on the strap of her bag. Not angry, not triumphant, simply tired. The hallway lights had reflected softly against the silver threads beginning to appear near her temples. 20 years of the company, reduced to a 7-minute meeting and a branded cardboard box. And still, she had left the documentation. That detail haunted him most. She could have walked away silently. Instead, she documented the risk one final time and handed it directly to legal counsel. Not sabotage, responsibility. The difference suddenly felt enormous. Back in the present, Victor broke the silence. Contact her. Vanessa looked uncomfortable immediately. We should consider legal positioning first. Martin turned toward her slowly. With respect, legal positioning stopped mattering when the Reuters inquiry arrived. That landed hard. Nathan noticed several executives suddenly avoiding eye contact again, because everyone understood what came next if the outage continued. Investors, regulators, audits, discovery requests, email chains becoming courtroom exhibits, the elegant machinery of corporate confidence collapsing under documented warnings. Vanessa crossed her arms. And what exactly are we supposed to say? Nathan answered quietly. The truth would be a refreshing start. The room cooled several degrees. For a second, nobody moved. Then Victor spoke with boardroom finality. Get her on the phone. Outside, another alarm erupted across the operations floor. Toronto latency spikes. Nathan's pulse kicked hard. He reopened the metrics instantly. Traffic rerouting had begun, overwhelming the last healthy region. The lighthouse was starting to flicker. We're losing Toronto, he said sharply. The room detonated into motion. Can traffic be throttled? Shift enterprise routing manually. Stabilize authentication queues. No, not globally, selectively. People began speaking over one another again, while Nathan typed commands across 3 terminals simultaneously. Rain hammered the windows harder now, wind dragging sheets of water sideways across the skyline. The building itself almost seemed tense. Then Martin's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Unknown number. The room quieted instinctively. Slowly, Martin answered. Hello? A pause. Nathan watched his expression change. Not relief exactly, but surprise. Yes, Martin said carefully. We've been attempting to reach you. Another pause. Then Martin straightened slightly in his chair. I understand. The room remained frozen. Even the projector hum suddenly sounded loud. Finally, Martin spoke again. Yes, he's here. His eyes shifted toward Nathan. She wants to speak with you. Nathan's stomach tightened. He accepted the phone slowly. Evelyn? For a moment, only soft background noise answered. Wind, maybe. Distant traffic, somewhere quieter than this frantic glass tower. Then her voice arrived calm as winter rain. Toronto still has 18 minutes before authentication saturation. Nathan closed his eyes briefly. No greeting, no anger. Straight to the problem. We're trying to stabilize rerouting. You won't, she replied gently. Containment recursion already started. He glanced at the metrics. She was right. Of course she was right. Around him, executives watched with the strained attention of passengers listening to cockpit instructions during turbulence. Nathan lowered his voice slightly. We need the authorization bridge. A small silence followed. Not dramatic, just thoughtful. Then Evelyn asked the question nobody in the room wanted to hear. Did anyone actually read the transition packet before terminating my access? Nathan looked slowly around the conference room. Nobody met his eyes. The answer sat there anyway, enormous and humiliating. Outside, lightning flashed bright enough to bleach the skyline white for half a second, and deep inside the failing system, Toronto's latency numbers began climbing faster. Evelyn spoke again, still calm. Then you're looking in the wrong archive. The line went dead. Nobody breathed. Nathan stared at the disconnected phone while the room collectively realized the worst possibility of all. The company still didn't understand its own infrastructure nearly as well as the woman they fired yesterday. And somewhere hidden inside the building was an authorization path nobody else even knew existed. The search for the hidden authorization path began at 11:51 a.m. By noon, the entire executive floor felt like a luxury hotel during a blackout. Beautiful, expensive, and one electrical spark away from public embarrassment. The soft gray carpets swallowed hurried footsteps, while glass walls reflected exhausted faces from every angle. Even the decorative plants near reception seemed stressed, their leaves drooping under fluorescent light like they had overheard the quarterly projections. Toronto had 12 minutes left. Every screen on the operations floor displayed some version of the same nightmare: rising latency, collapsing token refresh queues, containment recursion multiplying faster than engineers could interrupt it. Nathan moved quickly between desks, scanning archive deployment folders, while two infrastructure analysts pulled old migration records from cold storage servers. The office air had grown warm from overloaded machines and too many people breathing panic into enclosed spaces. Nothing under authorization management, one analyst muttered. Try legacy compliance indexing, Nathan answered. Already did. Another dead end. Across the room, Vanessa stood near the windows, speaking quietly with public relations. Her posture remained polished, but the strain was finally beginning to fracture the edges. Earlier confidence had dissolved into the brittle composure of someone realizing the floor beneath them was made of thinner glass than expected. Nathan overheard fragments as he passed. Temporary service degradation? Isolated infrastructure event? Customer confidence? The phrases floated through the air like scented candles, attempting to mask smoke. Meanwhile, reality continued deteriorating. A fresh alert exploded across the central dashboard. EU enterprise authentication failure threshold exceeded. Several employees visibly froze. One junior developer removed his glasses and rubbed both eyes with trembling fingers before whispering, "This is becoming irreversible." Nobody corrected him. Nathan returned to the conference room carrying a stack of archived printouts. Legal counsel sat buried beneath email records now, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. Martin Greer no longer resembled a composed corporate attorney. He looked like a historian discovering evidence of an empire collapsing in real time. "You need to see this," Martin said quietly. He rotated his laptop. An internal approval chain appeared on screen. Nathan's chest tightened instantly. Executive override authorization, approved. Security remediation postponement, approved. Risk acknowledgement, approved. Each signature sat neatly time-stamped beneath Evelyn's documented warnings, like polished nails sealing shut a coffin nobody believed they were building. Vanessa stepped closer to the display. Her face lost color. "That recommendation was provisional." Martin didn't even look up. "The email says otherwise." The projector hummed softly overhead. Rain streaked the windows in silver ribbons. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled across the city, low and distant, like furniture being dragged across heaven. Nathan suddenly noticed how tired everyone looked. Not physically tired, morally tired, as though the building itself had exhausted their ability to pretend. Then another message appeared on Nathan's phone. Unknown number again. 3 words. "Check disaster recovery?" He stared. For one brief second, irritation flickered through him. Evelyn could simply tell them directly. But almost immediately, he understood why she wasn't. Because this was no longer about fixing servers. It was about forcing people to finally see the architecture they had ignored. Not just technical architecture, human architecture. The invisible labor that kept entire corporations standing while executives congratulated themselves for vision and ambition. Nathan turned sharply toward the infrastructure team. "Open disaster recovery archives, full legacy indexing." An analyst frowned. "Those are deprecated. Open them anyway." The room erupted back into movement. Keyboards rattled, printers whined, Slack alerts detonated nonstop across giant wall displays. Outside conference room Atlas, employees clustered in nervous groups pretending to discuss workflow while clearly listening for fragments of catastrophic news. Corporate fear had a specific sound: lower voices, faster footsteps, forced smiles disappearing the instant someone turned away. Then the recovery archive finally opened. Nathan scanned folders rapidly: emergency rollback procedures, regional continuity maps, legacy failover protocols, and there, a hidden subdirectory, Mercer_Auth_bridge. The room went silent around him. Even before opening it, Nathan understood something important. Evelyn had never trusted the revised executive architecture completely, so she built a parallel safeguard quietly beneath it, not to undermine the company, to protect it. A strange ache formed behind his ribs. Inside the folder sat encrypted authorization maps tied to old continuity protocols, untouched by the optimization initiative. Elegant, redundant, safe, and directly beneath them, a final document. Read before activation. Nathan opened it slowly. The text was brief. If primary containment recursion activates during unsynchronized regional migration, authorization bridge must be manually initiated through physical verification sequence. Physical verification? Nathan frowned. What physical verification? Then he saw the location tag. Sublevel 2, Server Vault C. The room reacted instantly. Why would that require physical access? Because offline keys can't be remotely compromised? Elias answered quietly from the doorway. He had entered unnoticed. His face looked older than it had this morning. Nathan stood immediately. How long until Toronto fails? 6 minutes. The number landed like ice water. Everyone moved at once. Nathan, Elias, and two infrastructure engineers rushed toward the elevators while behind them, executives barked instructions into phones nobody fully trusted anymore. The hallway lights reflected sharply against polished marble floors, creating the strange illusion that the building itself was submerged underwater. The elevator ride down felt endless. No one spoke much, only the mechanical hum of descent and distant notification vibrations filling the silence. Finally, Elias exhaled quietly. She built an offline bridge without executive authorization. Nathan shook his head. No, he said softly. She built it because executive authorization kept delaying security fixes. That distinction mattered, more than anyone upstairs probably realized. The elevator doors opened onto sublevel 2. The atmosphere changed immediately. Gone were the polished glass walls and designer lighting. Down here, the building exposed its bones. Raw concrete corridors, humming ventilation systems, steel security doors glowing beneath cold industrial lights, the heartbeat beneath the polished corporate skin. They moved quickly through the corridor until Vault C appeared ahead. Locked. Nathan stepped toward the authentication panel. A small message glowed across the screen. Physical verification required primary security custodian. Everyone stopped. Silence. Then realization spread slowly across their faces. Only Evelyn could authorize it. Above them, somewhere far beyond concrete and steel, Toronto's latency alarms were probably screaming now. Nathan stared at the panel while the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. The company had spent years building systems around Evelyn's reliability while simultaneously undervaluing her existence inside them. And now the final safeguard protecting 4 regions, and possibly the entire corporation, required the one thing executives never planned for: trust. The phone in Nathan's hand vibrated once more. Another message, this time longer. Vault C accepts secondary verification, but only from someone listed in the original continuity protocol. Nathan frowned. Then his eyes widened. Because there was only one other name on that protocol, and it belonged to someone currently sitting upstairs in the executive crisis meeting pretending not to panic. Someone who had signed the layoff approval yesterday morning. Someone Evelyn had trusted anyway. You're about to discover which executive she secretly prepared for this exact moment. At 12:07 p.m., the storm finally knocked out the skyline. The towers beyond headquarters dissolved into gray static behind rain and electrical haze, while emergency lighting flickered briefly across the executive floor. For one strange second, the entire building seemed to inhale. Then Toronto entered critical saturation. Red alerts flooded every monitoring screen simultaneously. Authentication failure threshold exceeded. Containment recursion accelerating. Projected full regional collapse. 11 minutes. Nobody on the operations floor spoke anymore. The earlier panic had burned itself hollow, leaving behind a colder atmosphere, the quiet of people realizing consequences were no longer theoretical. Keyboards clicked softly, phones vibrated unanswered, half-drunk coffees sat abandoned beside terminals glowing crimson under fluorescent light. Nathan stood in Vault C staring at the verification panel, while rainwater dripped from his coat sleeve onto the concrete floor. Beside him, Elias checked the latest metrics. We're out of time. Nathan already knew. The message from Evelyn still glowed on his phone. Secondary verification authorized under continuity protocol. One additional approved custodian. Upstairs. He pressed the elevator call button immediately. The ride back up felt slower than gravity should allow. Every passing floor number sharpened the pressure in his chest. Somewhere above them, executives were probably still debating statements and exposure percentages while the infrastructure beneath their careers came apart thread by thread. When the doors opened onto the executive floor again, the atmosphere had changed. Not calmer. Worse. Quieter. The kind of silence hospitals fall into after doctors stop promising certainty. Conference room Atlas stood open now. Several board members remained on screen, their expressions tightened by the realization that this incident had escaped ordinary damage control territory hours ago. Vanessa stood near the far window with folded arms, staring at the rain-blurred skyline. Martin looked up first when Nathan entered. Well? Nathan didn't waste time. Vault C requires secondary continuity verification. Elias stepped forward. There's another authorized custodian. The room stiffened. Nathan looked directly at Vanessa. It's you. For a second, even the storm outside seemed to pause. Vanessa blinked once. No, she said automatically. That can't be right. Nathan handed Martin the continuity protocol printout recovered from disaster recovery archives. There it was. Primary security. Custodian. Evelyn Mercer. Secondary continuity. Authorization. Vanessa Vale. Signed 3 years earlier. The room stared. Vanessa slowly took the paper with visibly unsteady hands. I don't remember this. Nathan believed her. That was the tragedy. Evelyn had prepared redundancy systems so thoroughly that even the people protected by them barely noticed they existed. Martin adjusted his glasses carefully. She trusted you with continuity authorization. The sentence landed harder than accusation ever could. Vanessa sat down slowly at the conference table, eyes fixed on the document as if seeing a different version of the company for the first time. Outside the windows, lightning flashed white across the storm clouds. Nathan remembered something suddenly, an old leadership retreat years ago before restructurings and optimization language poisoned every conversation. Evelyn explaining continuity protocols to executives using simple metaphors while most of them checked emails under the table. Security isn't dramatic when it works, she'd said calmly back then. That's why people underestimate it. At the time, Vanessa had actually defended the budget approval. Nathan remembered that now with strange clarity, before quarterly pressure, before investor reshuffles, before ambition became the company religion. The board chairman's voice crackled through the monitor. Can she authorize the bridge or not? Elias nodded once. Yes, physically. Vanessa looked up slowly. Rainlight reflected against her eyes now, softening the sharp executive polish she normally wore like armor. Then came the sentence nobody expected from her. I want legal present. Martin blinked. Why? Vanessa stood carefully, still holding the continuity document. Because when this is over, she said quietly, I don't want anyone rewriting what actually happened. Silence followed, not hostile silence, honest silence, the kind that appears only after denial finally exhausts itself. They returned to Sublevel 2 together. Nathan, Elias, Martin, Vanessa? The concrete corridors hummed softly beneath industrial lights, while ventilation systems breathed through the walls like distant machinery inside a ship crossing dangerous water. Nobody rushed now. There was urgency, yes, but also something else settling over the group. Perspective. At Vault C, the verification panel still glowed patiently. Vanessa stepped forward. For the first time all day, Nathan noticed how exhausted she looked beneath the executive composure. Tiny cracks in makeup near her eyes, hands held slightly too still, the posture of someone carrying the weight of a realization much heavier than public failure. She placed her hand against the authorization scanner. The panel processed silently. Then, secondary verification accepted. A heavy mechanical sound echoed through the vault as internal locks disengaged one by one. Deep metallic clicks, like a machine reconsidering whether to trust humanity again. The vault door opened slowly. Inside sat rows of cold storage systems humming beneath low blue lights. At the center console waited the authorization bridge Evelyn had built quietly beneath the official architecture years earlier. Elegant, offline, protected from remote compromise. Prepared for the exact catastrophe nobody believed would happen. Nathan stepped toward the console carefully. Attached to the monitor was a single printed note. Plain white paper, simple handwriting. If you are reading this, containment recursion has already begun. Do not rush the bridge activation sequence. Stability returns slower than panic arrives. No bitterness, no revenge, no I told you so. Just instructions, professional to the very end. Vanessa stared at the note for several long seconds. Then she sat slowly at the console. Tell me what to do. Nathan guided her through the sequence while Elias monitored live regional metrics upstairs through a secured tablet connection. One key rotation, then another. Authentication bridges reconnecting manually region by region, like surgeons restarting circulation through damaged arteries. The process felt strangely delicate compared to the violence of the outage itself. Outside the vault, thunder rolled again through the building foundations. Then, Toronto latency stabilized. Elias looked up instantly. It's holding. Nobody reacted immediately. They were too afraid to trust relief yet. 30 seconds later, containment recursion halted, authentication queues stabilizing, regional recovery beginning. Nathan finally exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. Above them, the corporation would survive. Bruised, exposed, embarrassed, but alive. Not because of ambition, not because of executive messaging, not because of aggressive restructuring, because one woman had quietly done her job with extraordinary care long before anyone appreciated the importance of it. Vanessa remained seated at the console, staring at Evelyn's handwritten note. Her voice, when it finally came, sounded smaller somehow. "We laid off the person who built the emergency exit?" Nobody answered. There was nothing left to soften. Hours later, after systems stabilized and external statements shifted from crisis management to damage control, Nathan stepped outside the building for the first time all day. The rain had finally weakened into mist. The city smelled clean again. Wet pavement, electricity, distant coffee drifting from street vendors reopening after the storm. His phone vibrated once more. Unknown number. One final message from Evelyn. "Next time, promote the people who prevent disasters instead of the people who narrate them." Nathan stared at the screen, while traffic lights reflected red and gold across the rain-slicked streets. Then, for the first time since the outage began, he smiled. Not because the crisis was over, because somewhere beneath all the polished language and executive theater, the truth had finally become impossible for the company to ignore.